Change it to slideshow. I guess I can turn my camera on too. Hi, guys. Okay, now it's not letting me see. Are there people here? Should I go ahead and get started, or do we need to give them a minute? I know there was a problem with the event part, people joining.
We have 34 people in the room here.
Oh, well, good deal.
And let's see if the chat, and then I can keep an eye on the chat if you don't see that while you're presenting.
Okay.
But I would say go ahead, because if they get here late, they can always watch the recording.
Okay, wonderful. That sounds great. So I am here to present on the classroom and behavior management for middle schools. Just a little bit about my background. I began as a library assistant when I was still Oakwood Junior High back in January. It was actually January 2007. It was the 06-07 at the request of the staff, which was unusual. I had subbed in the building. I had been a coach in the building for about 3 years. And the staff actually came to me and said, please come be our librarian. So I did. I was lucky. Most of the students knew me. They already saw me as an authority figure. And I seriously was basically armed with a love of books, learning, and kids. If I could be a professional researcher, I think that's what I would do. So I just loved being in a school, loved my district, loved the staff, and thought, I'll just quit a really good paying job to go be a paraprofessional at a junior high. I was very blessed to begin at a time that allowed me to make a lot of changes and to kind of build the library program that I wanted to see. I do not want to disparage the former worker, but you couldn't necessarily get into the library. It was so full of everything. It wasn't welcoming. And so the first thing I had to do was kind of decide what I wanted the library to be and how to get there. But then one thing that didn't change in all of the changes that I made was the need for behavior management, especially at the junior high level. For me, I keep it simple. I've seen a lot of changes over the last 20 years, a lot of different programs. I keep it simple. I make sure that it mirrors whatever the district's expectations are at the time. But I keep it simple. I'm going to keep saying that because it's really important. Begin as you mean to go on. Early on, I decided that what I wanted was for the library to be the heart of the school. Is the presentation not sharing because it's showing it's sharing on mine? I saw it in the chat. Okay, other people see it. I will share a link when we are done. Brilliant. I wanted kids to be in the library. So I had to figure out how to make that happen. And I don't mind a little bit of chaos. I don't do quiet library very well. I want kids to be excited about reading in books, but it needs to be controlled chaos. Like I like rules. So how to make it happen. So the three big things that I personally focus on are building relationships, not only with the students, but with the staff, the parents, and the community. Having clear expectations and consequences, because both are equally important, and being consistent. Kids want boundaries and consistency, so give it to them. My little disclaimer is I often joke that junior high students are like wild animals and they can smell fear. I'm not always joking when I say that. Once again, I came in a very unique circumstance that I'm active in our community. We're a small community. Most of the kids know me. My kids were in school at the time. Now my grandkids are in school and my nieces and nephews. I am an authority figure because I'm in so many things. And not everybody has that opportunity. Junior high is my jam. They moved us to the grade school 3 years ago. I see the littles. And I actually use that as an opportunity. I'll talk about that a little bit later on building relationships. And I've been at the high school. I love junior high. Some of them look 12 and act 20. And some of them, are the exact opposite. It's hormone soup. I understand all of those things, but I still give them clear expectations, and I find that they meet them. Kids are going to make mistakes. And I tell them that the very first day, you are going to make mistakes. That is okay. I want you to make mistakes. That's how you learn. I learn more from my mistakes than I ever learned from anything that went right. What I want you to do is don't continue making the same mistake, because then it's not a mistake, it's a habit. So to start, I build relationships. Again, this can be simple. I was given a gym duty in the morning. All of our kids, pre-K through 8, gather in the gym for 15 minutes in the morning before heading to their classes. I do the littles. So I'm usually down with like the kindergarten to 4th grade. I turned it into an opportunity. One, my grandkids are in some of those classes, so they know me as, Raylan's grandma or Ashlyn's grandma. But I talk to the kids. I steal a class every once in a while, every couple of weeks, and we hide in the 7th and 8th grade library because it is separate from their library. And then the teacher comes and finds them. Usually I read them a little book. I buy some younger level books just to have in here. I already have younger kids saying, I can't wait until I'm big enough to go in the big kids library. Establishing those relationships early. It can be simple. Say hi in the hallways. I know it just sounds very simple, but I'm amazed at the number of people that don't greet kids in the hallways. And even if I don't know their name, because there's a lot of kids sometimes, I will greet them, and I will, if they have on a shirt that's, a Marvel shirt or a Harry Potter shirt, I'll make a comment. I ask them what they're reading and what they thought about it. If I couldn't go to their ball game, guys, it's not realistic for us to be able to go to everyone's ball games every night. I say that I'm there because I do student council, but there's a lot of events. If I can't make it, I just ask them how it went. Hey, how was your ball game last night? Sorry, I couldn't make it. And the important thing, and I'll talk about this a little later too, is doing the same after a behavior incident. If a kid misbehaves, guess what? That next morning, I'm still going to say, good morning, Sean. How are you today? Did you do anything exciting last night? First of all, it throws them off, okay? Because their mind's blown, because obviously when they're disciplined, we hate them, right? You don't like me. I just act like everything's normal. And then they learn to expect that. I use the example, by the way, this is a stock picture. This is not one of my students. And the student that I'm talking about, obviously his name is not Sean. But I said, meet Sean. He moved from a large urban area to our small rural district in the 7th grade. He struggled with behavioral issues and outbursts. But by the middle of his 7th grade year, he learned my expectations and he met them. The library became one of his go-to spaces. He is now in high school and he still greets me every time he sees me. Whether I'm at the high school, we're at a public event. And it was hard work, and it was different behaviors than we were necessarily used to at the school. But because I built that relationship with him, I stayed consistent. I stayed clear in my expectations with him. He knew what to expect from me, and it built a relationship of trust. And it worked. So that brings me to my next big one. Have clear expectations and consequences. I get the kids in very shortly after school starts, usually the first or second day of school. I want kids in the library. I want them to have books. So we have a rules and policies and procedures meeting in the library where I go over a lot of things. And that's when I address behavior. And I frequently start out by telling the kids we can have as much fun as they can handle. And then I ask them, what do they think that means? And they'll say, if we act right, then we get to do things. Exactly. They will occasionally forget or decide to test me. And so I follow through. I am clear with my expectations, and I don't have a lot of expectations. My pet peeve is leaving paper on my table. So that's one thing that I always address. But I tell them, I ask you to listen when I am speaking or someone else is speaking. Be respectful. Don't leave paper on the table. Push your chairs in. That's about all I cover, those 4 things. If other things pop up as we go on, I'll address them. But I don't overburden them with rules and regulations. I just explain to them that We have rules in the school. They've gone over that a million other places. Those all apply here. But I also let them talk when they're in the library, but I also explain to them that sometimes they're not going to be able to talk and that I will let them know when that is. I try not to make changes to my rules or procedures mid-year. I try to have them implement at the beginning of the next year, but I have made adjustments if needed. Consequences, along with expectations, go consequences. And I follow through every single time. Doesn't matter if I'm tired, doesn't matter if I'm frustrated, doesn't matter if I'm busy and I don't want to mess with it. I follow through with consequences every single time. And I can tell you, last year we had a very challenging 8th grade class, is what the staff called them. I only had 2 real behavior incidences in the library all year that had consequences beyond just a normal talking to. And both of them got detentions. And it was actually more of a testing issue than a library issue. I just happened to be in charge. And it didn't happen again. As a matter of fact, the week later, one of them started to have a repeat behavior. And I said, do we need to spend more time together one-on-one? I take it as a compliment when you guys misbehave sometimes, because I think it's your way of asking to spend time with me without being overt and asking it. You don't want to be embarrassed. And the kid was like, no, Mrs. Grimm, we don't need to. The flip side of that, I am sometimes seen as probably one of the stricter people in the building. I have kids begging to come to my library. And people don't understand that. They're some of the newer teachers, the younger teachers, and they're like, you're pretty strict. And I'm like, yes, I am. But kids still want to come see you. Yes, they do. Because I have clear expectations. I have clear consequences. I am genuinely concerned with them. I do build relationships with them. And that's my final and probably most important, is be consistent. Building relationships and establishing clear expectations and consequences are important. Consistency is key. Be consistent in your expectations. Communicate clearly and repeat as needed. Try not to make a bunch of changes throughout the year. Make sure that they mirror your building policies or your district policies. But be clear with them. Make a poster if you need to make a poster. Reiterate them as needed. Be consistent in your consequences. This builds trust. Usually it's enough for me to take a student to the side and have a discussion with them and say, hey, what's going on? You don't normally act like this. Do you remember what the rules are? Can you tell me what the rule is and how what you did may have violated that? And we have a discussion. Sometimes it's a group discussion. I'll share another incident. It was our 8th grade class last year, and the language arts teacher, who also had a co-teacher in the class, brought the students to the library. We were doing book talks. I try to do book talks about once a month. And the teacher asked for some time to go over a few things first. So I was just sitting over at my desk doing my thing. And all of a sudden, one of the boys pops off with an expletive starting with the letter F. And so the teacher said, okay, out in the hallway, and they go. Well, some of the other ones were snickering. So the co-teacher in the class said, hey, that's enough. We don't need any responses from the peanut gallery. Well, one of my students, actually Sean, the fictional name, but real person, popped off with, well, you look like an effing peanut, because he didn't understand the reference to peanut gallery. And so then the co-teacher took that student out. So then this left me with the rest of the class, and they were kind of laughing and carrying on. And I said, okay, guys, it's time to have a talk. So I came out from behind my desk. I said, what about that was funny? I didn't think it was very funny. Would any of you talk to me like that? And there was a bunch of no, Mrs. Grimm, and put their heads down, and I wouldn't do that. And I said, guys, let's have a talk about this. We need to be respectful in our interactions. and we need to be mindful of each other. And then we need to understand that sometimes people have bad days. And so we might not be willing to put up with as much on those days, whether that's fair or right. It's a fact. And at the time I was going through um, I had two very recent deaths, and my mother had just been diagnosed with breast cancer. And once again, this is a small community, so everybody kind of knew. And so I shared to them, guys, some days I'm a little more frustrated or short-tempered, whether that's fair or not. And I try to be mindful, but you guys have to understand that sometimes we feed off of each other, and we just need to take a step back. And that sometimes what's allowed at your house is not allowed here in a social setting. Some parents allow their kids to cuss. My parents were not those parents. I was not that parent. My husband was not that parent. But there are parents that do that. But you can't do it at school. And I give them the example of when I was in school, there were parents that bought their kids cigarettes at the ages of 15, 16, and 17. Allowed them to smoke at home. They weren't allowed to smoke at school. I can tell you, I'm 50 years old. My mama still wouldn't go buy me cigarettes. Um, but that was a family decision, and that was okay. And I'm careful to not disparage their families. I tell them, guys, different families run different ways, and I would never try to tell your family what they could allow or not allow in their house. But when you're here, you're part of a larger society. You're old enough to understand expectations, and we will review them as needed. Um, so far, that seems to work. Also, the being consistent in your interactions. Um, Nothing puzzles them more when you do not treat them differently. And this goes back to when you do have to have some consequences. Um, I adore when they say, "Oh, you guys don't like me," or "This teacher hates me." And I explain to them that that's way more investment and keeping track of who I don't like than I want to do. And sometimes because they are junior high, I can use the sarcasm and say, "No, I dislike you all equally. There's no favorites in how I dislike students." Um, you can do that with some and not other. I know they say you're not supposed to use sarcasm, but once again, junior high, it works sometimes. Um, when I do not treat them differently, the next morning, I still greet them. "Good morning. How are you? Did you do anything exciting last night? You know, how was your ball game? Did you read anything good last night?" Um, it throws them off balance. They don't know what to do. And I kind of like keeping them off balance. Because, and exactly, someone just said every day is a new day. And that is true. Every day is a new day. Now, if they have a behavior that is a habit, um, they are a repeat offender about it, then I will escalate it a little bit. And we have a behavior flow chart at our school that tells me the steps that we have to go through. I very seldom have to use that. And part of the reason is I think because I am so clear and concise with it, I follow through and I keep it simple. They've got enough floating around in their brains that I really don't come up with a lot of, I don't consider them, I don't want to say nonsense rules, but some stuff just doesn't need to be written down. Some stuff doesn't need to be hammered over and over and over. I focus on the things that I find problems with and address those, and it's worked. I Like I said, kids love to come to the library. So that's my end goal. I want kids to be in the library. I want them to enjoy the library. I want them to enjoy reading. And so they need to have the behavior to be able to be in here and handle it. I allow kids to come in and play games as a reward. I have some Oculus. They can come in and use the Oculus. So we also kind of use the library as a reward system for behavior that also reinforces it that, hey, if I want to be in the library and do all this extra cool stuff, I have to follow the rules and expectations. Um, it works. Do you ever rely on administration to support you in giving consequences? Excuse me, guys, that's the passing bell. Um, yes and no. Very seldom. Once again, our district has a flow chart that there's kind of like a level 1. It tells us what things we should deal with. There are level 2 things that go to them. So if it is a level 2 thing, I will refer those to administration. I usually notify administration of if I've had to give a consequence. The way we record it is weird in teacherese. It used to be if it was an office, if it was like an office referral, we would record it in discipline. If it was handled in-house in the library, we would record it in behavior. The new admin that we're under since last year doesn't want us putting anything in discipline. They're the only ones that record in discipline. So if I record something in behavior log, I do usually follow up with an email to admin letting them know it's there because they don't get notifications, and telling them, what happened and what the consequence was. But I'm very lucky that I don't have to give out a lot of consequences. Some of the kids say I have mythical status. I don't know about that. But, excuse me. Once again, it's different here because we are a small community. Our K through 8 building has just 600 and something kids. Our high school, I think, is up around 250 now. So we don't have a lot of kids district-wide, and it is a small community. And I will share the link out. I wanted to leave some time for questions. I turned my camera off so y'all didn't have to see me cough. I'm going to turn the mic off for a minute too. Oh my gosh, sorry about that. I swear this happened last year also. My middle school does not include a 6th grade. They technically made us part of the grade school. My library is just 7th and 8th grade. The other library, which is about 4 times of my room, sorry about the bell, does K through 6. And I did propose taking over the 6th grade. And they said they would look at that for next year. There's a big maturity difference between 6th grade and 8th grade, but I think we could make it work. And that would also allow more time for the librarian at the other end of the building to have more class time for the younger classes. Library is used as a reward system. What are your thoughts on a library doubling as an ISS timeout room? That is funny. When I started, my library was the in-school suspension room. And I had 2 cubbies in a corner. The kids were brought to me in the morning. They were in the cubbies all day. I'm going to cough again, excuse me. I also think it was a way to build a relationship. Now, last year, they tried to get me to oversee lunch detentions, but it wasn't in the library, so I didn't care for that. I was expected to go to a different room for a large portion of my day. So it worked as an ISS and timeout room. I have had kids over the years, my Sean was one of them, that when he was having a bad day, he would have a pass and he could just come to the library and chill for a few minutes and do a reset. I love that. My true goal is for the library to be the heart of the schools. I want kids to see libraries as more than just books and spaces. I want them to want to come here in whatever form that looks like. So if they need to come here as a timeout room, great. Come on in. My new setup doesn't really allow for in-school suspension anymore. They occasionally will bring somebody in and put them at my table. But I don't have the cubbies and the space that I had before. Do I have scheduled time each week for a class multiple times a week? Have a flexible schedule? Yes and no. So I schedule 7th grade on Tuesdays. Each hour, the whole hour is booked for them. 8th grade on Thursdays. And then we have 2 self-contained classes. They come in on Wednesdays. And I do lessons. Sometimes they just check out books. Sometimes I do lessons. I try to do lessons with all the subjects. I recently did, I have a Lego wall, mobile wall that I built out of an old audiovisual cart. And so the social studies, 8th grade social studies was learning about the Civil War. I recommended they use that to simulate Civil War battles. So I try to push in, I've done a vote for books where we learn the election process through campaigning for books. So I don't have as much flexibility this year and last year as I did in the past. We're under new admin and they're still trying to figure out what I do because it was, it was just different when we were out on our own. But I have been advocating really hard. I actually just got to pass out library passes yesterday. Other than language arts, they weren't really allowing people to come into the library or to have a lot of open library. I had a meeting, I advocated, and I got that returned. And so yesterday I got to hand out library passes, and I do 2 different ones now because that's what works best. One is a Stacks Pass. So each teacher has their name and it says Stacks Pass. It's laminated. That's for students to come down at any time during open library and exchange a book. They're expected to be here 5 to 10 minutes. My other pass, and I see we only have about a minute. My other pass is called Room of Requirement, my nod to Harry Potter. That is for them to come down here and be here as much as they want. They can sit in the beanbag and read. They can play a game. They can play on the Oculus. They can do a reward. And then I also try to stay open for makeup testing. I will make sure that my presentation gets shared out, the link. And I thank you, everyone. And actually, I'm doing the next presentation too.
Thank you, Luann. I'm going to stop this recording and we will pick up the recording here again in a minute.